I love it. Hi, everyone. We are chatty today. We are chatting even as this tape starts. Hi, I'm Sam Osterhout, and I'm joined by Andra Watkins For Such a Time as This. Hello, Andra. How are you?
Hello, everybody. I'm good, and I hope everybody here is holding up okay.
I do too. This is Unholy Ground for all of you fans and newcomers to the show. This is the show where we decode white Christian nationalism, and by we, I mean Andra, and by me, I mean the guy who asked the questions. Today, we're going into the 4th of July weekend. We're taping on Thursday, July 2nd. You're watching this after the 4th, during the 4th weekend, and we were talking in the green room about how it's hard to feel celebratory coming into this weekend. And a lot of that has to do with all the things we talk about on this show. I want to tease out kind of what we're going to talk about, because this is a big one, I think. On Tuesday, the most powerful Christian nationalist, I'd argue, in the federal government was handed a question. It was pulled straight from the Bible. And it's the same Bible that this Christian nationalist says should be the document that runs our country. And it was a question about this, and he refused to answer it. And it's not just him, right? Last week, you've been writing about, or this week, you've been writing about a White House commission that handed the president a massive report, something like over 200 pages, 4 pages, that explained what religious liberty is and what it's supposed to mean in America. And wait until you hear who got to decide and who didn't. So we're going to talk about how all of these things sort of tie together, and how the white Christian nationalists are really creating a map for the next 250 years. And that's why we really have to talk about all of this. So I want to roll the clip first, and then I want to talk about the 7 Mountain Mandate. So let's, there's my emoji. Always comes in at the worst possible times.
Oh,
we're going to leave that in. Okay, here's the clip.
Facilitate the killing of children.
You're basing
Simple question.
You're basing it on a premise that is false. I'm not going to answer that question.
Take my time back. You wrote in a 2021 article in Newsweek about Christian nationalism that our rights and duties are understood to come from God. Isaiah 58:7 commands, quote, "Share your food with the hungry and provide the poor wanderer with shelter." Are you saying God was misquoted or wrong?
I'm sorry. What does it have to do with the question with regard to our
It's
administration?
morally wrong to facilitate the death of children.
Okay, so obviously anybody who's watched this show knows exactly who that is. That's Russell Vought. I want to get to that piece, right? Because it's very telling, and you've been talking about this for a long time, that he refused to answer a question about the Bible that he so loves. But I want to talk first about the 7 Mountain Mandate, and this is a thing that we've brought up in the show before, that we have kind of glanced over, and it's not the primary mission of all Christian nationalists or Catholic nationalists or anyone like that, but it is a template. So what is the 7 Mountain Mandate?
The 7 Mountain Mandate is this really ugly graphic. It's what we could find online. It is put forth by the New Apostolic Reformation, which is a group of Christian dominionists. They're primarily charismatic Pentecostals. This was formed in the 1990s. So it's really beyond my involvement heavily in white Christian nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Matthew Taylor is a real expert on this particular group and has studied them deeply. I believe that they developed this 7 Mountain Mandate of dominion and taking over these sectors of society, which is really everything. If you look at the 7 mountains that they believe they have to control, it's really everything. I really believe that they pilfered this in some form or fashion from Opus Dei, which is the Catholic cult, one of the far-right Catholic cults within the Catholic Church, because the Catholics have a very similar vision of taking over the world and controlling these different pieces. And they have done that similarly. We have a couple of them, at least, on the Supreme Court, the Roberts Court. So, that has also been their goal. In the more Protestant versions of white Christian nationalism that I grew up in, we were taught that we should, of course, try to be out in the world putting Christianity on people, but it wasn't this organized.
Right.
Now I believe all of them follow some loose-knit version of this because it's so well designed, so easy to look at and remember and target which one you're going to try to take over and control. So, Mike Johnson, for example, is Baptist. And the Seven Mountain Mandate really isn't a Baptist thing, but he has also adopted this kind of worldview, even though he's not in the New Apostolic Reformation.
And, by some accounts, up to 55% of evangelicals and even 41% of all U.S. Christians agreed with this sort of construct, that Christianity and Christian leadership ought to control business, government, family, religion, obviously, media, education, and entertainment. So, we've talked a little bit about who built this, but this, I think, plays off of, everything that we've been talking about. Russell Vought not being able to talk about this, about the Bible verse, is essentially saying, we'll explain the problem with him not being able to talk about this Bible verse, despite him believing in the Bible so deeply.
It wasn't that he wasn't able to talk about it. I wish that these politicians and journalists and just everybody all the time would do exactly this to these people instead of asking them other questions. Because if you watch the whole clip, he sits there and just swats away every other, well, there's this journalistic piece, there's this statistic, there's this person that's documented to have died because USAID was gutted. And he just swatted all of that away, and he has that dead-eyed. So many of the people in this regime have just, they have dead-eyed. I don't know how else to describe it. Like their faces they can make their faces not move and not react. And they just look like corpses to me.
Yeah. Like they're going inside of themselves. Like,
right. And so,
weird.
That was the only time in that entire interaction when, he kind of went. And he did then try to swat away again, but he was rattled by that.
Right.
And so, how I would have come back to him when he said, I don't understand how that's relevant, would be to say, oh no, it's very relevant because you are on the record as saying that you believe this is a white Christian nationalist country and you are a white Christian nationalist and you are applying that worldview to our government. So I believe it's very relevant for you to answer this question about this Bible verse and starving people and homelessness from Isaiah. It's completely relevant. How does that compute with your definition of white Christian nationalism and Christianity? It's very relevant, and I expect you to answer it. That's what I would have said. But we are not trained as a society to push on Christians that hard.
Yeah,
so
no, we aren't. We've talked about that a lot too. So Vought is an interesting character, and I think that this is where we kind of make this transition, right? That they have this mandate, whether it's the Seven Mountain Mandate or some other mandate of coercion and control. And we're going to talk more about this commission here in a little while. But Vought has also, he told Steve Bannon in an interview, he calls it radical constitutionalism, right? And in plain English, that's essentially two ideas, right? The president alone controls the entire executive branch, and he can refuse to spend money that Congress has already approved. So this is all of this in practice, right? And the problem is that's illegal. The president is not allowed to actually do that. Congress passed a law that says, right, the president cannot refuse to spend the money that they have allocated. Russell Vought thinks that that's unconstitutional. So the movement believes at this moment that God put the right men in charge, right? So what is the theory that they're working off of here? How is it that they can say that the Bible ought to guide our governance, but then starve children?
The theory that they're working off of here has nothing to do with Christianity and everything to do with their own money and power and greed and control mechanisms. I'm not saying that Russell Vought is not a true believer. We were talking in the green room about how Russell Vought knows the Bible. He's very familiar with it. He's not going to make the Pete Hegseth mistake of quoting Pulp Fiction as the Bible. He knows the Bible. So, he's not one of those people who doesn't know what the Bible says. But, a lot of these people know it so well that they can cherry pick a narrative from it that gives them power and control and money and influence. And, this is not a new story. People have been co-opting religion to do that for as long as we've had religion, practically. So this is just a new iteration of it. And that's really, I'm not saying Russell Vought isn't a true believer. I'm not speaking about the state of his soul. I don't know about any of that. What I'm saying is it's a very useful tool for him. To essentially be the co-president with Stephen Miller, which is what I think has happened.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And the idea is, with God as their witness and taking into account their version of dominionism, where they have control anniversary, that a democracy was meant to be, power was derived from the ground up. Right. And this is a absolute subversion of that. This is power derived from the Lord above, downward. Right. So that people like Vought and Miller, I can't even say his name, can rule over the lesser than, the non-Christians. They are allowed to ignore the law.
Well, and what's so sad for both of them is they're really just billionaire tools.
Yes.
Who won't have power when they're not needed anymore. And they don't, that they all have this arrogance that they are the essential piece of whatever, but none of them really are. So there's that piece, and that's borne out by history as well. So, Russell Vought isn't essential.
No. And I think that, look, there's also, I want to talk a little bit about how it's not just rebuilding the sort of government with these two men, or the two men and a handful of other Christian nationalists and billionaires. They are restaffing everyone, right? There's the reclassification that's called Schedule F that we've talked about a little bit. And everyone out there, you guys probably know about this better than we do, but it strips job protections from career civil servants so they can be, fired and swapped out for handpicked loyalists. And Vought's, apparently, there's some reporting that says his own think tank keeps a resume database.
Mhm.
That number's in the tens of thousands, possibly, to be able to just refill those seats with loyalists. So, it's defunding what Congress has ordered. It's replacing all of these objective and neutral experts with true believers, non-experts. This is where we are. So,
can I mention the federal granting process here, because that is a piece that people can do something about?
Let's talk about that.
He's also rewriting the federal granting process and trying to put political appointees that he controls in charge of all federal grants. And, my husband worked in the public sector on infrastructure grants for much of his career, getting federal infrastructure grants. So he wrote a very long public comment, but all of you can write public comments until July 13th. Vote has put this together to try to give political appointees the chance to swat away lots of federal grant writing, instead of having an expert panel pick who gets considered. Grants can be pulled at any time if a grantee violates some part of the president's agenda, uses DEI, all of these nebulous things that they want to say are bad. And they are expecting other agencies who get federal grants, which Americans really don't understand how our government works, because a lot of municipalities, a lot of state agencies get federal grants to do a lot of the things that you just take for granted. And so they expect any money that flows through those agencies to also be, those agencies have to police and report violations of a set of standards to the federal granting agency so that they can then pull money. It will be a nightmare.
Right.
It will make federal granting impossible.
And it's already rigorous, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's already a big hurdle, huge obstacles for people who would like to receive grants.
So you can put up a public comment by July 13th. Vote's hoping that nobody will.
Right.
And I wrote a newsletter about it, I think last week, and you can go and look at what I said. And I gave some points that people could hit in a really quick comment, make it your own words. But, that's another way that Vote is fundamentally reshaping the government. And, my husband and I were talking about this yesterday on a walk, because he was like, that's one of the reasons why Vote is so especially insidious, because he understood how the government functioned before. And he knows what he wants it to look like. And he knows how to write all this garbage and gibberish and words and words and words and words that nobody's going to read to accomplish what he wants to do. And so it's really important to leave a public comment, even if it's just a few sentences.
And I think, the clip we played was fundamentally about USAID, right? It was about that those funds that are allocated for the least of us, who have real need. And the Lancet reported that, projected that 14 plus million people will die by 2030 as a result of these cuts, including 4.5 million children under 5. Boston U, said that some, over 300,000 people have already died as a result of this. And this Vote is not accepting those numbers, or he's not claiming those numbers, right? He's denying that those numbers touch him and his efforts. So you said, they call the Constitution a Christian document, but it's really only a Christian document when it empowers them, right?
And their definition of a Christian document, which they don't agree about who's a real Christian. So I don't know how they can expect us to know what that means.
Right. Well, so, last year, an executive order created a White House Religious Liberty Commission, right? And this last week on the 26th, I think, they handed the president this big report. So a religious liberty document was chaired, right? The commission was chaired by the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick of Texas. Ben Carson was on it, Franklin Graham, Paula White, Cardinal Dolan, notorious lib, and Dr. Phil, of course, because why not? There were no Muslims, no Hindus, no Buddhists, no atheists at the table. You said there was a sort of smattering of Jews who agree with the white Christian nationalist agenda.
Only one on the main commission.
I see. So talk us through this document, because in the last, as we were talking a minute ago, you were saying, like, look, this is Vought's vision of America, and this document starts to sort of develop that vision in a more granular way. All of the documents he writes does that, right? Do that. But what's going on with this report?
Well, Vought didn't write this.
No.
I have a theory about it, and I've spent a lot of time with Heritage Foundation writing and Heritage Foundation ideas over the past couple of years. And they all are they have common threads. They're always very cohesive.
Yes.
They use words very carefully to lay out what they want to do in manners that seem benign at first glance. They're usually very dense with small type, and they project an Opus Dei Catholic version of white Christian nationalism, because the Heritage Foundation is controlled by Opus Dei Catholicism primarily. It's funded by that. So you can look at words like flourishing, which occurs in the first sentence of the Religious Liberty Commission report, and that is a Heritage Foundation Opus Dei Catholic word. And so, that for me, it looked to me like the Heritage Foundation put this thing together, some rough version of it, and then gave it to this committee and said, this is what we want you to find. And they probably even gave the president a list of people that they wanted to be on this commission.
Right.
And they did not want people like Paula White Cain and Dr. Phil and Franklin Graham. And, but because the president won't be told what to do, it ended up being a bigger hodgepodge of white Christian nationalism than the Heritage Foundation wanted or could control. I mean, the only, Ryan Anderson, which I left out of my summary, and we've talked about him before when we talked about the Phoenix Declaration, because he did a whole big presentation on that. So he's also Catholic. I believe Allison Ho is Catholic, but we could not confirm that. So I didn't say that. But there are quite a few Catholics, in my view, on this committee. And that would have been the skew that the Heritage Foundation wanted. But when you get into the report, number one, they've changed fonts. They use a much bigger font than normal to make this thing go on longer than it needs to.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I mean, if you look at it and you compare it with some of their other work products, it looks very different.
Andra, I'm like so in awe of your eye for detail, by the way. You're like, oh, this is an interesting font for this white Christian nationalist organization.
Well,
I love this so much.
They have
like you have the eye, the nose for this.
Well, I spent a lot of time with their stuff, and I was just like, this started out as heritage, and it turned into something else.
Right.
Because every person on this committee is a narcissist, prima donna, spotlight hogging, power hungry person.
Except Dr. Phil, he's perfect.
And many of them hate each other and believe that the other ones are going to hell. I mean, I can't imagine. I would have loved to be in that room or in these meetings. Every time Paula White Cain opened her mouth, I can imagine both of those Catholic priests and probably the Orthodox Jewish rabbi and probably Franklin Graham, several of them just absolutely, utterly having their heads blow off on fire from having to listen to a woman talk and tell them what she thought about anything to do with the Bible. All of those men hate her because they hate that she's a pastor. They don't think she should be. They hate that she has the president's ear. They hate that she has the position she does. Most of them probably hate Dr. Phil, who the president put on there. That was not a Heritage Foundation pick because, Dr. Phil's all shucks and people like him and he has a presence and he's got this following and, a lot of them don't have that. And so when you start breaking down, and Dan Patrick, I will never see him again without seeing him in the Oval Office behind the president with his stabby finger saying, separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's not there. I mean, that's what he did. Just his angry, stabby little finger. He's such an angry, miserable little man.
Well, look, I think that's a great spot to ask. What does this commission recommend? Because it really deals with, it tackles that idea of separation of church and state, but you say it flips it on its back. How so?
White Christian nationalism has always done that. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I was taught that the founders meant for the separation of church and state to protect the church from the state, and that government shouldn't have anything to do with religion. But religion can have everything to do with government. We should not keep religion out of the public square. And that is essentially what they state in this document. They state that that's what the founders mean. Every time you give them something that they wrote about it, well, that's not in the Constitution. So therefore, that's not really what they meant. Since it's not in the document, and they go into great detail in it about how the wall of separation of church and state that Thomas Jefferson wrote about was really not meant to be that's not really what he meant. If he had really meant that, he would have put that in the Constitution. Right.
That, it replaces the church state wall with a bridge, right? It is, they want to repeal the Johnson Amendment that makes it so that churches can't endorse candidates and remain tax-free. They want to let faith-based government contractors ignore civil rights laws. You even say that the extension of this is a hotline for teachers to report religious liberty violations. And as somebody who grew up, it's for all intents and purposes secular, especially when compared to these bozos. I was always taught that the separation of church and state meant that nobody could tell me what religion I have to be, right? So that is the point of all of this. We all get to be free to choose how to believe or what to have faith in or what to not have faith in and all of that. But this turns that on its back.
It does. And it gives, other people have covered all the different things that are in this document. It really is a horrifying leap of theocracy, theonomy. If you read all the different recommendations, all of them, came from Project 2025 to some degree or another, but they're not as cohesive because these people argued about it. It was a set of people from across white Christian nationalism and people adjacent to that, like Orthodox rabbis who go along with it for their own power and influence. So, it wasn't as cohesive of a group that the Heritage Foundation can control. So it's a mess. It's very incoherent, but it's also something that we have to pay attention to because they are trying to say, essentially, that a violation of someone's religious liberty is telling them that you disagree with their stance on same-sex marriage.
Right.
Or challenging them on their stance on abortion. or asking them why they took a book with a homosexual character out of a school classroom or library. Or, we could go on and on and on with that. That is really what they are saying religious liberty violations are. They have the right to force all of us to listen all the time to what they believe the Bible says about everything. And when we push back on it at all, we are violating their religious liberty. And so the natural outcome and progression of that is an NSPM 7 hotline to report anti-Christian bias because you offended somebody by saying, I don't agree with you.
And it goes even further into NSPM 7, which we've talked about a lot. The National Security Memo on Domestic Terrorism, it lists anti-Christianity right next to anti-capitalism, anti-Americanism, Americanism as an indicator that someone might be a domestic terrorist, right? Mm-hmm. And this is everything you're saying. It turns the FBI's terrorism task forces and the IRS loose to investigate and defund groups that fit that criteria, anti-Christian. Mm-hmm. So one federal body defines the favored Christian, favored Christianity, and another treats opposition to it as terrorism, and red flags you for not only not believing, but questioning. Right? I mean, this is, as we go into this 4th of July weekend, that's where we are.
That's where we are. And I've always said, and will continue to say, white Christian nationalists have every right to believe whatever they want. They have the right to believe this stuff. They have the right to read the Bible and say, I think it gives me the right to be a bigot. They do. I don't agree with their interpretation of that, but they do have the right to believe whatever they want. What they don't have a right to do is force me or you or anyone else here to agree with them or to believe the same things. We cannot be compelled to agree with them, but that's what they're trying to do here. And it's a 4-alarm fire. Everybody has to understand that. I may sound like a shrill, hysterical harpy every week, but that's really their goal, is to make it impossible for you to say, I disagree with you because you're saying things that are offensive to me, and calling that Christianity. So one of the things that I called for this week, I do a very deep dive. I did it on Tuesday into who's on this committee and how differently they all believe. And then I gave on Wednesday a list of loose topics. As Americans, we don't like to push back against Christians. And people on the left always want to say, just live and let live. We don't need to challenge these people, but we have to.
Yes, we do. And look, I think we started off with Russell Vought, refusing to discuss how a starving child fits into the Bible. But also we ended with them calling you a terrorist for refusing to believe them. Right.
And so
this is a conflict, to say the least.
It's really important. If I'm going to be called a domestic terrorist for offending some white Christian nationalist feelings, then I want to know what they believe.
Yep.
I want them to define exactly what a Christian is for me. And they can't, because they don't agree.
That's right.
About that. So, and the point of us pushing on them is not to have theological arguments with them.
Nope.
It's not to really argue with them at all. It's to force them to argue about it. That's
exactly
what we want.
Yeah. So that's, I think, part one of our call to action is ask them, your school board, your city council, your dog catcher, your representative, anyone waving this religious liberty bullshit around, make them define it, force all of that incoherence into broad daylight, right? Mm-hmm. Get it for the record, put it in the comments, make them articulate that vision, because the daylight is a amazing antiseptic.
Yeah.
I also wanted to go back to the public comment. I think that's call to action number 2. Guys, you're going to be busy next week. The public comment window. Go ahead.
When I first, did my public comment, there were 31,000 public comments. Michael just came over here and said there are 143,000 public comments now. So people are commenting, and this is going to make a difference. So add your comment. This is something that people really care about, and you should care about it. So take the time, write a few sentences, and make a public comment.
Yeah, and we'd love to see what you write. Put it in the comments on this post once we post it, and also the link. Andrew, you've got the link in your piece from this week, and for that matter, subscribe to For Such a Time as This, and send us what you're seeing in your own communities and what you're doing about it. Andra, I hope you have a good weekend. This is an amazing conversation.
I will have a great weekend because I am going to reach out to several people that I care about and tell them how much they matter to me.
That's what
and that's how we can celebrate.
That's a great way.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.